Hi everyone, welcome to 10 Best Practices for High Quality Actions. I'm Owen, I'm a product manager for Actions on Google.
I'm Erica, I'm a linguist, and I help developers learn how to design great conversations between people and machines.
I'm Shikha, I'm a partner technology manager. My team works with developers and partners to help them build high quality actions.
And we're really excited to have you with us today. Actions on Google is the platform for developing conversational experiences for the Google Assistant. By building and deploying an action, you can make your product or service available to all the users of the Assistant. Today, we're going to share some tips for how to build high-quality actions. Between the three of us, we've worked with hundreds of developers, so we're really excited to share our experience of what's worked best. Now, before we jump into how to build high-quality actions, let's spend a moment and talk about why we should build high-quality actions. Why does quality matter? Well, one very important reason for building high-quality actions is that it leads to happy users. But another really important reason is that high-quality actions increase the chances of your action being promoted by Google. The higher the quality of your action, the more likely Google is to drive traffic to your action, for example, through the Assistant directory, through implicit invocation, even through Google marketing newsletters. We've observed that on average, high-quality actions receive about 2 to 10 times the traffic as other actions. So we know that quality is very important for traffic. The next question you might be asking is, how does Google measure quality? Well, the answer to that is twofold. The first component is, how do users respond to your action? Do users like your action? And to measure that, we look at a bunch of metrics. We look at a number of usage metrics, for example, engagement rate, cancellation rate, user ratings, et cetera, et cetera. The second component to this is this statistically significant? Okay, great. So the metrics say that your users love your action. Do we have enough traffic to your action so that we can trust what the numbers are saying? In this talk, we'll go through both of these components. Number one, we'll talk about how to build an action that users love. And number two, we'll talk about how to drive some initial traffic to your action. Our goal is that by the end of our 40 minutes together, you'll be able to build a high-quality action that boosts your chances of being promoted. Our talk will take us through the entire development cycle, from planning to implementation to launch. Let's get started with planning. There you go.
So the first and most important step is to pick the right conversational use case, because the use case is the foundation that everything else on your action is built on. Now, the keyword here is conversational. You want to make sure that your action is really leaning into the power of voice. So how do we do that? One thing you can ask yourself is, would this save the user time and effort as a conversation? Let's take, for example, adding an event to my calendar. I could do that with more than 10 taps on my phone, or I could just do it with one utterance and already have the event title, date, and time saved. So that seems like a clear win. Another thing you can do is look to real life as your inspiration. If something is already getting done in the real world through conversation, it's probably a natural fit for an action as well. That also means that your users can apply their real-world knowledge to the action, which really lowers the learning curve and makes it easier for them. One example of that is we order coffee from baristas with our voice all the time, and so it should be pretty easy to adapt that to action form. Once you have some use cases in mind, you can gut check them by asking yourself, how do people usually do this, and kind of compare the distance between that and how they're doing it in your action. So again, when it comes to ordering coffee, we said people do that with baristas through their voice all the time, so it's not too big of a jump to do it with an action. On the other hand, what about something like you're browsing through local coffee shops, looking for the perfect coffee experience, you want to read all those reviews and ratings? At that point, you might be more interested in something like browsing a map, or seeing a bar graph of the rating distributions, scrolling through pages of reviews. And so that would be a bit harder to translate into action form and maybe wouldn't lend itself as easily. This tip alone could be its own talk. There's so much more to say about it. And it actually was in 2017 here at I/O. So I really recommend that you go on YouTube and look up this talk by Daniel Padgett from 2017. finding the right voice interactions for your app. Okay, so you have your use case, you've started figuring out what the flows are going to look like. Now you want to think about the details of how exactly your action is going to speak. And I really recommend that you incorporate the user's history with the action so that that's reflected in what it says to them. When you go to a coffee shop for the first time, just to give a concrete real-life example, the barista might welcome you, ask you if you need any recommendations, tell you what your featured drinks are, ask what you'd like to order. But after you keep coming there day after day and you always order the same exact drink, it gets to the point where you walk in, the barista makes eye contact and recognizes you and just says, the usual? And that sort of efficiency can only happen because of the shared history. We want to go for something similar in our actions. This is a strategy that we call tapering, and it's all about optimizing the prompt for the user. This can make it much more efficient, and it also feels more personalized and more intelligent. And the fact that it's speaking naturally the way that a person might also means that the user feels more comfortable speaking naturally back to it, which makes it, again, easier for them. To see this applied to an action, let's say that we're building a coffee ordering action and the user's choosing where to pick up that coffee. Maybe the first time it's suggesting a specific store and asking if they want to get it there, but after they keep picking up from there, we can just use this shortened prompt and you can see how much faster that is, as well as being personalized. So now that you've thought about how your action is going to talk, you should think about the other half of the conversation. How's the user going to talk? You want to make sure that they can speak naturally. And what do we mean by naturally? Well, when people talk to each other, they express themselves in a wide variety of ways. And so we want our action to also understand a wide variety of utterances. That way the user doesn't have to worry about things like memorizing commands to interact with your action. They can just talk spontaneously and it'll work. That makes it more comfortable for them. Your action will also come across as smarter and friendlier. Again, to see this in the context of what it would look like in an action, let's say that I've made an ice cream ordering app for my ice cream shop, and towards the end of the user's order, the action asks if they want sprinkles on that. I want everyone to take a moment to think of a few ways that they would say yes. Yes, we want sprinkles. How are we going to say that? Well, here's a few ways. Here's a few more. And still more. And I'm sure there's tons of other ones that are not even on this slide. So how can we solve for this easily? Well, let's go over the basics first. This is done by building out the recognition grammars. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, a recognition grammar is the set of phrases and utterances that your action can recognize and understand. And you kind of, the basic way to build this out is you kind of come up with a list of responses that a user might come up with, and then you want to go beyond what your own brain can come up with and tap into other people's brains. Ideally, you'll test with your users, but if they're not available, you can ask your friends or coworkers. Then start coming up with variations on everything that's in the list. And then once you have maybe beta testers, you can start checking the logs to see if anything you missed slipped through the cracks and use that to plug those holes. But how can we make it super easy? That's with Dialogflow. Dialogflow is our tool that you can use for building actions and doing a lot more. I really recommend that you use it because it can do a lot of cool stuff that we'll go through right now. It is particularly strong in building grammars. I actually call that Dialogflow's superpower. So one really great feature is pre-built follow-up intents. That is grammars that are made for you for some really common user intents, like the yes that we were talking about for the sprinkles before. And then there's also no, cancel, and a few other ones. And you can actually edit these grammars so you can customize them to be a perfect fit to your specific prompt, which I really recommend that you do. But this is a huge time saver, great shortcut. You can also use system entities, which let your action understand some common categories of words like colors, numbers, or one of my favorites is the example that we see on the screen, date, time. It can understand anything from 3:15 to 2 weeks from Friday and put that into a standardized form, which is pretty cool. It's really powerful. And for everything else, there's machine learning. You can fill in a few sample phrases in the training phrases section, and Dialogflow will generalize from there. So we see here for the ice cream ordering app, I have one utterance that says a scoop of this, a scoop of that, and then another utterance at the bottom that's saying a flavor and then a topping. And then when this user utterance comes along, which is not in the grammar, and it's not even a form that's in the grammar because we have a combo, we have a scoop of this, a scoop of that, and also the topping, my action is going to understand this no problem because it was able to generalize from those seeds that I put in there. If you want a deep dive on Dialogflow, I suggest you come back to this same exact stage tomorrow at 2:30 for the session called Let's Talk. It'll be really helpful. But even if you build the best grammar in the world, there's still going to be times when your users get stuck, and you want to make sure that you're able to get them unstuck. And the key to that is using the context. By context, I mean the stuff that was already established earlier on in the conversation. So why do we need to worry about this? Even when people talk to each other, we mess up all the time. Think back to maybe the last time you stumbled over your words or someone said something and you didn't quite understand. But we recover so flawlessly that we don't really even notice this. So what does this tell us? One thing is that if we mess up when we're talking to each other, we're definitely going to mess up when we talk to machines too. The other thing is if we are able to recover and still move on, maybe we can do something similar in our action. Let's see an example of how Starbucks did this in their action, and you're also welcome to try this action yourself later on. So it's towards the end of the order. Starbucks is asking the user what size drink they want. It doesn't understand what the user says, and so it reprompts by saying, sorry, what size? And the user is able to get right back on track. Research shows that when errors are handled smoothly like this, users don't even remember that they happened, which is good in terms of user happiness. And it also means that users are staying in your action longer because they're not erroring out. So this is super important. Let's break down why this specific prompt was so effective. The number one key is that it mentions the context again. In this case, that was the size. By mentioning the size again, it's kind of reiterating what the key piece of info is that it needs and kind of focuses on that. It also sounds like it's making the conversation with the user on the spot. So for example, you could also try this with a generic prompt like, what was that? But then you risk things like the user maybe repeating something that they had said already. Here, by emphasizing the size, we're making sure they stick to providing that piece of info. It's also really quick. So again, you might think, well, couldn't I just repeat the same question and that would also repeat the context? Yes, but that would be really unnatural. People would not do that in conversation, and so it makes it harder for the user to interact naturally. And also, if they tried to respond, that means that they just heard the question, so they don't need to sit through the whole thing again. You can just shorten it and make it more efficient. That sorry at the beginning is also a clue that maybe things didn't go quite as well as anticipated, so that's a good clue to the user. And again, this sounds very natural, so it's easy to interact with. This style of error reprompt is called a rapid reprompt, and our data shows that this style is effective with users and they like it. One note is because it's contextual, that does mean you'll need one of these prompts for everything that your action says, but the win in quality is well worth that, and also it's much easier to write these than you might first think. You can learn more about how to do that in depth on our design guidelines here. And those also go into depth into other scenarios that I didn't get into here, like what if you reprompt and then the action still doesn't understand? Or what if the user doesn't say anything at all? So you can definitely check out the guidelines, learn that. It also covers all kinds of other scenarios related to the plan and design of an action. So that's it for planning. Let's dive into implementation.
All right. So now we're getting into implementation. And our first tip for implementation is around devices. In particular, our recommendation is to build for speakers first, then build for screens. One of the great things about building for the Google Assistant is that it's available on over 1 billion devices, ranging from smartphones to speakers to smart displays, watches, even cars. I really love that you can build your action once and potentially have it available on so many different devices. Now, building for all these devices doesn't need to be difficult. And our tip for making it a little bit more simple is to start with speakers first, and then extend your action to the screen. We found that doing it this way is a lot easier than going the other way around. And because all of the Google Assistant devices respond to voice, you get the most bang for your buck in this way. So once you've taken Erica's tips and you come up with a great conversational design, then it's time to start thinking about extending your action to the screens. And we'll go over some ways that you can do that through this tip. So let's take a scenario. Let's say you decided that you wanted to build an air quality action. And this action, if your user is on a speaker, then you want your action to say what the air quality is. If they're on a device with a screen, then you want your action to expand the action a little bit more with visuals. Here's how we might actually be able to do this. So now we're going to your fulfillment code. Here we're in the intent where the user has asked for the air quality. And what we're going to do is, first we're going to check to see if the user is on the device with the screen. So that's what we're doing in line 1. In step 2, if the user has a device with a screen, then we can create a basic card, put an image on it, and then show it in the conversation. If the user doesn't have a screen, then we can just speak what the air quality is. So very simple. And this is what the experience would actually look like for the user. So here, the user asked for the air quality on their phone, and they got a basic card with an image that helps them to extend the air quality. So this is fairly basic. For your action, feel free to extend the card a little bit more and make it a little bit more engaging for folks on the screen. Now let's talk about a more advanced technique. So let's say, in addition to telling your users the air quality in their location, you also want to show them a map of the air quality around their area. So this is probably going to be pretty hard to do for a screen or for a speaker, but fortunately, Actions on Google has a really nifty feature that actually lets you transfer your user from one device to another device. And so in this particular example, if your user is on a speaker, you can actually request for them to go from the speaker to a device with a screen. And this is how you would actually do it. So we're back in your fulfillment code. We're back in the intent where the user has asked for an air quality map. And what we're going to do is, in step 1, we're going to create a variable called screen available. And here we're going to store the results of the function that checks to see if the user has a screen available for any one of their devices. Right. In step 2, if the user is already on a device with a screen, then we'll show the map. But if the user isn't on a device with the screen, then we'll create a new surface object. And what this new surface object does is a request that the user transfers from their current device to another device. In this particular example, we're asking the user to transfer to a device with a screen. And then we're going to show this new surface object in the conversation. Lastly, we'll check to make sure that the user has actually accepted the transfer or not. And this is what the experience would look like for the users. All right, so say they're on the screen and they ask for an air quality map. We request that they transfer to a device with a screen. They say yes. On their phone, they'll get a notification from your air quality action asking them to continue the conversation. If they click into this notification, they'll bring up the action with the air quality map loaded so they can pick up right where they left off. I think this is a really nifty feature to really help you be with your users wherever they are. Now, we've only scratched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to developing for multiple surfaces. If you guys are interested in learning more, we have another talk right after this one around this exact topic. So feel free to stick around if you're interested in learning more. OK, great. So we've talked about how to simplify development for different devices. Our next tip is around simplifying your code. And the recommendation here is to make your life easier with helpers. Helpers are pre-built components that Google has already created for very common use cases. And let's take an example to see how helpers might work. Let's say you want to build a taxi action. As part of this action, you want to ask the user for an address to send a taxi to. Well, what's the best way to do this? You can actually use a helper to make your life a lot easier. And the way we're going to do that is here in step 1, we're going to create a place object. And then within the conversation, we're going to invoke the place object. Now, after the user has given their address, you can check the place object for the user's response. Now, you'll notice a couple things here. So first of all, you didn't have to write any code to parse the user's address from their voice. Google's done that already for you. Number 2, you didn't have to worry about error handling. Google has also done that for you. And number 3, your user's response is in a very easily accessible format through the place object. So overall, instead of writing many lines of code, you just had to write a few lines of code using the place helper, using the address helper. It makes your code a lot simpler and a lot easier. This is what the experience looks like for the user. So the action will ask the user for the address, the user will give the address, and very quickly you'll be able to use the address directly. In addition to simplifying your code, these helpers also simplify the user experience because it standardizes it across many different actions. So we highly recommend that you use them. In addition to the place helper, we have a number of other helpers that you might find useful. For example, we have helpers that allow you to get the user's name, their location, the date and time, et cetera, et cetera. One helper that we think deserves its own tip in particular is around account linking. Use account linking to personalize the user's experience. Account linking allows you to connect your action to your own authentication system. So let's take a scenario. Let's say that you're the owner of a pizza shop, and you have your own web app, and you have your own app that allows users to order pizzas from you directly. Let's say you also have an assistant action that lets you check the status of your order. Now, in order for users to actually do this, they'll have to sign in to your system. And the way they do this is through account linking. And to do this is actually super simple. So in your Actions console, the first thing you need to do is to enable account linking. Then back in your fulfillment code, you can create a sign-in object and then invoke it in the conversation. Lastly, you need to check to see if the user has successfully signed in or not. But the entire flow takes just a few lines of code to build out. And this is what it'll look like for your users. All right, here, your users ask you for the status of their pizza. Google will allow them to check to see if they have an account with you. If they do, then they can grant permission to your pizza data through your action. And if they grant permission, then they'll be able to get the status of their pizza directly from your action. So super simple from a user perspective. 2 clicks, and they're signed in to your system. We've seen that when users successfully sign into their actions, their engagement rate with your action grows significantly. Here's some recommendations for making sure that your sign-in rate stays high. First, ask in the right context. So in the previous example, we asked for sign-in after the user has asked to check their pizza status. Here, the user knows why they need to sign into the action. They know what value they're going to get by signing in. We've worked with a few other actions that in the past that ask for sign-in as soon as the user opens the action. And what we've observed is that users tend not to sign in, and they also tend not to return to the action afterwards. So the lesson here is ask in the right context so the user knows what the value of signing in is. The second recommendation here is to use Google Sign-In. So we offer several options for account linking, including OAuth, but Google Sign-In is the preferred method. And the reason for that is threefold. So number one, A lot of assistant users have already signed in to their Google accounts, so using Google Sign In is really easy. We saw in the previous example, it only took the users 2 taps to successfully sign in. The second reason is if you use Google Sign In and the user doesn't have an account with your system already, they can create a new account, which is good for the growth of your product. And then number 3, Google Sign In is already built for both voice and visual, so you get the most bang for your buck by using it. And that's it for account linking. Next, we'll go into launch and growth.
Now that you have implemented your action, are you ready to launch it? Not quite yet. This brings us to our next best practice. A common theme that we have seen with most of our high-quality actions is they do extensive testing with selected early adopters. It's like doing a soft opening for a restaurant. Have you been to one? A new restaurant owner, before they open their restaurant to the public, they do a series of nights. They call it soft opening. They invite few family and friends who enjoy a good dining experience and some critics who can give them true, honest, real feedback on the food, the restaurant, the service, etc. We want you to do something very similar with your actions. And to help you, we have created 2 release channels for you. First is an alpha release. Alpha is an awesome way to do quick iterations for your action when you are in the early stages. When you've done your manual testing, open up your action to your immediate team members. You can select up to 20 testers at this point. Your action does not undergo a Google review, so whatever changes you make will go live in just a couple of hours. So this will really allow you to do early iterations. We recommend that you select your testers from your employees within your team and some extended team. At Google, we call this team fooding, and we do this pretty much for all our products. Once you do alpha and you feel comfortable, expand your testers to what we call a beta release. You can select up to 200 testers for this. Before your action goes live to beta, it goes through a full Google review. We check for policy compliance, and you decide when you want it to go live in production. We recommend that you select your beta users from mostly folks outside of your org and include a variety. When you do alpha and beta release, make it count. My team incubates new features for actions in Google. We do alpha and beta extensively with our early access partners and developers. And here's how we make the most of it. We want you to do same with your actions. First, give basic instructions to your testers. Give them some basic expressions that they should use and tell them the goal of your action. But don't tell them too much. You want your testers to struggle a bit. This helps you capture their edge cases. Next, be there in person. Sit and watch them if possible. We understand it might be impossible to do this with all your testers. But even if you can, with a selected few, it would really make the difference. It'll help you capture their body language, their expressions, the way they interact with your action, and you don't want to miss this deep feedback. Finally, use a diverse set of testers. Ideally, a sample that represents your actual user base. People from different age groups, different genders, backgrounds, some tech-savvy, some non-tech-savvy. This helps you capture a broad perspective and helps you cover a good range of use cases. And when ready, go live. But once you go live, how do your users know that your action exists? Let's say you created a game, a very cool game, but your users don't know. Let me show you two simple steps in which some of our developers have been able to boost the discovery of their actions and increase their daily active users by up to 5-fold. Do you know how most of the assistant users use when they want to play a game? They simply say, play a game. And when they do that, Assistant shows them a list of our top games. You can further filter down using a category of your choice. It will give you a filtered list. I like maths, say go to Math Showdown. And then you can start playing that game. You did not know what game you wanted to play with. Assistant helped you narrow down the choice. But how do we make your game appear in this list? Play game was one way to express what we called in an assistant world, your intent. There could be hundreds more. You can see a sample on the screen. Now you can go ahead and add all of these to your action as custom variables. But it might be impossible to capture all possible variations. We have done this work for you by something called built-in intent. A built-in intent maps hundreds or thousands of these variations into one common variable that you can simply add to your action. In this particular case, play game. And when added, your action becomes eligible to appear in that list. It's very simple to add this built-in intent to your action. You simply go to Dialog Flow, select an intent of your choice. You can further specify the category that your game fits in, like music, education, etc., and that enhances your chances of appearing in that filtered list. Besides play game, we have 14 other built-in intents that are available today. They are in developer preview, so you can apply to use them. We created these based on the most popular use cases that we see on Assistant and what our developers like you love to build. If you see a built-in intent that's not here, you can always apply for it through our website. We plan to continue to add to this list. Remember, it's important to select the right built-in intent, but it's also very important to ensure that your action is high quality. Owen earlier mentioned certain metrics that we use to measure the quality of your action. How a user responds to it, the success rate, the error rate, etc. A combination of right built-in intent and high quality really boosts the chances of your action to appear in this list. But what if you're not a game, or you don't fit into any of the other 14 built-in intents that I showed? We have other option for you. It's called action links. These are simple hyperlinks that take a user from the link directly to your action. When used right, these can be a great discovery mechanism for your action. And it's very simple to generate them. Simply go to your Actions console, give a title, and get the URL. We publish it for you. Just copy it and use it on your website, on your blog, social media, or wherever a link works. Let me show you a very cool way in which one of our Italian developers, Giallo Zeffirano, used action links. Now, they have some amazing Italian recipes. And when you go to their website and say you're visiting this pasta recipe, which I really like, you see this cool floating assistant badge on their site. And when you click this assistant badge, it takes you to the exact action and pasta recipe in Assistant, and it takes you through the actual steps to make that pasta. You can start cooking hands-free right away. How cool is that? Jalo Zafrano, when they launched this experience, they saw a significant spike in their daily active users. And at the same time, they were able to give this innovative and cool cooking experience for their food-loving users. This is one way you can get creative in your own way when you use action links. Now that you got that spike in daily active users, how do you sustain it? How do you keep your users engaged and re-engaged? We want you to become a part of your users' daily routine. Users like you and I have some daily habits. For example, in my morning, I like to check the weather, listen to the news, see my calendar, and plan my day. In the evening, I like to wind down, listen to some music. Assistant today has some pre-built-in routines for you, and users can add multiple actions to each of these routines, and they can invoke them using a single command. You can make your action eligible for these routines. Let me show you how. I like to use Headspace for my meditation. Say I'm talking to Headspace. I select today's meditation of my choice. And when I'm listening to this meditation, I like it. I see this option to add it to a routine. When I select it, it would ask me to confirm. I say yes. Then it gives me the option to add it to one of my existing routines. I select bedtime. And that's it. I was able to add Headspace and that meditation to my bedtime routine. And let's see what happens when I invoke bedtime. Assistant remembers that I added Headspace and that exact meditation, and it would play it for me. How simple is this experience from the previous one? I didn't need to remember Headspace or need to select a meditation. Assistant did it for me. You can do this with your own actions. And if, say, you think your action is not good fit for routines, we have other options for you. Daily updates. These are updates which Google pulls from your action at a time specified by the user. So for example, I like to get a yoga routine in my morning or want to check my stock portfolio. Other option is notifications, when your action decides when it wants to send an update to the user. For example, say, hey, your pizza will arrive in 10 minutes, or your movie tickets are ready. Enjoy your show tomorrow. It's very easy to include any of these user engagement tools to your action. Simply go to your Actions console and enable the ones that you see fit. So those were our 10 best practices to plan, implement, launch, and grow your action. My team has been working with Actions in Google since we launched it. Over the years, we have seen the challenges that our developers and partners have faced. We know what works and what doesn't. And what we shared with you today are our learnings from closely working with those developers. We hope you're able to use them. And mind it, you can use all of these best practices today. They work for you. Let's do a quick recap. When you plan, make sure you pick the right use case. Let your users speak naturally and help them when they get into an error or when they get stuck. When you implement, build for speakers first, then screen. Leverage helpers when possible, and give your users a personalized experience using account linking. Finally, before you launch your action, thoroughly test with early adopters using alpha and beta, boost discovery using action links and built-in intent, and meet your users where they are by becoming a part of their daily routines. Remember, high-quality action makes your users happy, and in turn, it makes your action eligible to be promoted by Google, which in turn drives more users to your action. There are several more resources available at I/O to help you learn more. I'm highlighting a couple of talks. We are also available to talk to you in person at the Sandbox, office hours, and Code Lab. We would love to talk to you, answer your questions, and help you get started. So do visit us. Thank you.